Get off. Let's hear it off. First, I would like to introduce and bring to the stage NIAC Action Executive Director Jamal Abdi. Thank you very much. Jamal leads NIAC, the largest and oldest grassroots Iranian American organization in the country, coming all the way from D.C. Thank you, Jamal. Then, can we start to bring up Tarek on the Zoom as well? Can I ask to bring up Tarek on Zoom? Our other, we can introduce him now. Tarek Abash, from the co-founder of A New Policy. For those of you who don't know, A New Policy is a nonprofit lobbying organization dedicated to making American policies towards Palestine and Israel align with our national interests and reflect the best of our values. A longtime political strategist, Tarek has been known at the forefront of efforts building power across America, and he was among the first political appointees to publicly resign from the Biden administration in protest of the U.S. government's policy regarding the Israel genocide against the Palestinian people. So thank you, Tarek, for being here. I would now like to invite Odelia Matter, Program Associate on Middle East Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, where she directs federal advocacy for peace and diplomacy in the region. She is one of the leading organizers around the country running the Ceasefire Coalition for 2 years, bringing different groups together, all to help stop the genocide and to take accountability and put American values first. So thank you, Odelia, for being here. And last, but really not least, someone I'm just a fan of in general and who's incredible, I would like to invite Katie Halper to the show. Sorry, Katie, give me a moment.
Very on board. Travel that's endlessly rewarding.
Katie, I lost your bio for a moment. Okay. Katie Halper is a documentary filmmaker, a political commentator, and host of the Katie Halper Show and co-host of the Useful Idiots podcast. She's coming out with a documentary of Jewish Holocaust survivors who are opposed and fighting against the genocide in Gaza. So tune into it soon if you haven't yet. Woo! So let's get us started. Let's set the stage, and then I'll pass it over to Katie for our first question. But just to set the stage, before we dive in, why are we all here tonight? We are here because AIPAC. What is AIPAC? The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which for decades has been one of the most powerful lobbying organizations in D.C. In terms of spending and influence. And they've been pushing for hawkish policies, Israel first policies, to defend a genocide and to excuse and build space for regional war, including war with Iran. So we are here today also because their influence is changing. They are losing their grip of hold on American politics. And in recent years, our movement, the People's Movement, is winning. And in recent months, we've had huge wins. So we're here tonight just to bring top strategists from D.C. together in this heralded space, the People's Forum in New York City. So I'll kick it off, Katie, to start us off. Thank you.
Such a professional. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for inviting me. I want to start off by asking both of you, actually all of you, right? Because you're not just a moderator, you're also a respondent, right? Oh, and hi, Tarek. Hi.
Hey, Katie.
Nice haircut. I wanted to ask all of you if you could discuss the trajectory of AIPAC, the strength of AIPAC over history, where you see it now. Is it weaker than it has been before? Is it stronger? Should we expect it to continue to weaken? Is it how formidable of an enemy is it?
Okay, I guess I'll start. Before I start, I just want to say, Eitan, thank you for mentioning that NYC DC Connect. To some extent, I believe that we should turn the table at some point, because we in DC have so much to learn from what you all have been able to do and succeeded at. And hats off to everyone who's been involved in recent campaigns, who continues. Hats off to folks who are investing time and energy into advocacy, and especially Congress-facing advocacy, when it's not your job. Hats off to folks who are here in their free time. I really appreciate you being here. The AIPAC question is huge. I know my colleagues will dive and cover things that I hadn't even mentioned, because it's such a multi-pronged entity, and we are seeing the result of generations of work evolve and become policy that is implicating millions of human beings' lives, including hundreds of millions in the United States. The trajectory and the history is a bit convoluted. I do know that one of the founders of AIPAC, or one of the people that turned it from a grassroots organization where folks would send postcards sometimes to their members of Congress or raise money for pro-Israel messaging, one of those founders who created that initial evolution that made it this multi-billion-dollar entity was an advisor to weapons companies before he took on AIPAC as his pet project. So I know that part of the trajectory comes from a lot of intergenerational work, a lot of, I don't know if folks here know, in Jewish peoples or Zionist Jewish families in the United States, there's a long history of having what's called a tzedakah box, which is a little box where you donate money or coins every time you can. And over time that goes to an organization like the KKL, JNF, or AIPAC, or other, pro-Israel entities. So I think that intergenerational pull has created a foundation of political donations, and money is one of the forefronts of power that they have that I don't think we match yet. I know Tariq is working very hard on that. I know other parts of the movement are as well. And I think that their hold on Congress has been really, really influential in the past years, where you have members of Congress facing fear tactics that have worked in the past and are working less today than ever before. Every single decision that they make in regards to the Middle East goes through an AIPAC person, or goes through the AIPAC muscle that they've established in their minds due to this kind of prolonged effort to guide them into specific policy. So I think where their power comes from at the moment is predominantly money as a tool of influence in Congress and the administration. Their intergenerational pull and the foundation of donating and political donating in predominantly Jewish American families. Their hold on Congress that we'll get into afterwards when we discuss tactics. And one more thing is their coalitions that they have made with CUFI, for example, Christians United for Israel, and the Evangelical Zionist Lobby in general. That's a really strong coalition, also intergenerational, that we're seeing a lot of its influence today. I'll pass it to Jamal.
Yeah, so my experience with AIPAC starts from working on the Hill. And so I used to work on the Hill for a member of Congress who was actually very active on Palestine, and was Brian Baird. He was the first, he and Keith Ellison were the first U.S. officials to actually go into Gaza in 2009 after Cast led. And anyway, so I was a legislative assistant, and unlike all, most of what you do in Congress if you're staff is, you take a lot of meetings. You're just meeting with constituent groups, lobby groups, various interests from the district. And to be honest, I was young. I didn't really know what I was doing. When I first started, it was like I would sit down in these meetings and it'd just be like a flurry of acronyms coming my way. I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'm writing it down. I have no idea what's going on. The one group, though, where the leadership staff, in the office made sure that I was prepared was when AIPAC came to town. And it was, the way AIPAC operates, there's many different facets of it. But from my perspective at the time, it was one sweet little old lady who would come to town, and I was told, you roll out the red carpet. Not in those words, but you got to be careful. This is an important meeting. This is an important person. And prior to my boss's advocacy, she had, I think, organized fundraisers for him in the district and things like that. So this was a relationship that needed to be managed. But it wasn't just, so AIPAC has at least one person in every congressional district that I think is really relevant to us, because I think that AIPAC can be built up as this big sort of monolithic, scary thing where there's conspiracies about how they operate, and they're spending, now millions of dollars in elections. And I think there's a risk that activists on the outside say, okay, it's all a conspiracy, or it's this, it's an entity that we can't counter. But at its heart, what AIPAC is doing is organizing people in congressional districts and making sure that every member of Congress has at least one person who is the AIPAC representative and who is, a voter, usually somebody who's organizing fundraisers, member of the community. But they are doing, and we'll talk about hopefully all the political spending and sort of the direction they have taken. But at its heart, they are organizing people in districts to advocate for these things. And I say that because I took the lesson from being on the Hill and how, and it wasn't just AIPAC, then we'd have the Israel Project would come in. And they, exact same ask sheet that they put in front of me. And it was usually Iran sanctions. It was, make sure we send the billions to Israel. Here's how much we need to send this year. And then here's the Iran sanctions bill we need to keep America safe or whatever. But, Israel Project would come in and they'd always ask me, oh, Jamal Abdi, where are you from? And I'd say, I'm from the district. I'm from Washington State. Thank you. Where are you from? But that's the model that we have tried to set up, this model of where we have people, they need to be organized and they need to have relationships with their members of Congress. Because at the end of the day, through all the political spending, all of the stuff they're doing at think tanks and, work in the media and everything, the heart of the operation is these people who are doing what you and I can do, and that's just being organized and showing up. And so fundamentally, that is where they are strongest. Now, just to talk about kind of how AIPAC has changed, I mean, AIPAC, so AIPAC was always the strongest group on the Hill, and this, organization that would just dictate to members of Congress what they needed to do. And the implication was always, AIPAC was not a PAC. It was, Public Affairs Committee or something, but they didn't actually formally raise money for candidates. They had a constellation of individual donors, affiliated organizations like NORPAC, other political groups, but AIPAC was actually a policy and lobbying organization. And in 2015, after much lobbying by AIPAC to impose sanctions on Iran, crippling sanctions, broad sanctions, they worked to tank, Obama's initial efforts at diplomacy by going through Congress to sort of force the White House's hand on sanctions to try to kill talks. But anyway, 2015, the nuclear deal happens. And this was, AIPAC's top priority was to prevent any rapprochement between the U.S. and Iran. And to any normalization and bringing Iran in from the cold was, like their worst nightmare. And 2015 is when Netanyahu came to Congress, went behind Obama's back to lobby against him in front of the entire Congress, all this sort of unprecedented stuff. And for the first time, you started to have Democrats saying, I don't trust this organization. This organization is actually out for us. For a long time, AIPAC was viewed as this bipartisan group that would work with everybody. They donate to everybody. They raise money for everybody. That changed in 2015 over the nuclear deal. That really broke the back of AIPAC. But when you have a group like that has a decades-long history, crazy amounts of money, crazy amounts of just organization and formal ties, they retooled. And so by, 2018, 2020, AIPAC decided to sort of take the mask off and say, all right, we are a PAC now. We are not going to coyly, you should sign this sanctions bill or, send billions of dollars to Israel and wink, wink, we're going to have a fundraiser for you. They just said, okay, we're just raising the money. and we're actually going to just scare people with the amount of money that we raise. And so they formally became a political action committee. They set up a super PAC, United Democracy Project. They spun out a affiliated group called DMFI, Democratic Majority for Israel. And this was because after 2015, they realized they were losing ground among particularly progressives, but with Democrats. And so they changed their operation into what it is today, which is just this blatant, we're going to dump $20 million in Jamal Bowman's district to defeat him from Congress. We're going to raise money, and it's all out. So it's all out in the public. And I think we're now at this moment, though, where the backlash has come. And it's actually, AIPAC's motto used to be a lobby flourishes in the darkness and dies in the light. That's Rosenberg. That was like it was actually a haiku, believe it or not. It was a haiku that he wrote. I don't know the meter, but it was something along the lines of a lobby flourishes in the darkness, dies in the light, and that's how they used to operate. Now they are in the light. They are doing all this stuff very publicly, and I think this is an opportunity now to use that against them because this calculation worked for a couple of cycles. They knocked off Cori Bush, they knocked off Andy Levin, they knocked off Jamal Bowman, but now the backlash is coming, and thanks to the work that activists are doing, groups that are in the room, groups like Track AIPAC, really exposing them and making it toxic to be affiliated with this group. And so I think that that lovely haiku is going to be one that resonates in the ears of the staff at AIPAC because they came into the light, and now we're going to expose them and actually turn it against them.
Yeah, Todd. Who are you?
Can I just say one? Can you hear me? Just one thing I want to inject, which is, can you also address, if relevant to what you're saying, the cracks that we're seeing, not just in terms of AIPAC's popularity or support among Democrats, but with people like Tom Massey, right, who talks about having an AIPAC babysitter. So the bipartisan nature, hopefully, of the shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And just want to say thanks to the People's Forum, to NIAC, to everyone for coming. Really appreciate the community that you are building and the work that you are doing, because in order to take on the infrastructure that AIPAC has built over decades, it is not going to be just one group, one organization, one community. It needs to be cross-sectional. It needs to be so many different people who recognize that AIPAC has actually been not a single issue organization, but actually by pushing members of Congress to provide this unconditional level of support for an ever authoritarian and further extreme regime in Israel, we're actually seeing politicians now having to take positions on prioritizing funding to the starvation of Palestinian children, to the bombing of civilians in numerous countries in the Middle East, and at the expense of infrastructure here at home, at the expense of food and nutrition assistance for struggling, vulnerable Americans, and at the expense of our own security here at home when it comes to what ICE is doing to our communities, what is happening on college campuses, and the level of repression and the attacks on our free speech. AIPAC is actually undermining every component of our American values, and that is something that cannot be forgotten. And I think that is one reason, coming back to Katie's point, why it's so important for us to recognize that this isn't just a Democrat issue, this isn't just a partisan issue, this isn't a progressive issue, this is an American issue, plain and simple. There are millions of Americans that are seeing how problematic this policy of unconditional support has been, that AIPAC has been championing and pushing down the throats of our members of Congress that are supposed to be representing us. And it's also why you're seeing the Marjorie Taylor Greenes push back, the Tom Masseys push back, the Seth Moultons who have taken money from AIPAC for years, for numerous cycles, now not just saying I'm not going to take their money, but actually I'm going to return their money for the first time ever. Now, where are they on their policies? Where are their votes? There's still a long way to go. There's absolutely an important role for organizations like NIAC, like A New Policy, like FCNL, to be on the Hill doing the lobbying work that needs to happen, because these members, at the end of the day, we know that they're hearing more from millions of Americans about their frustration with this unconditional support on social media, through phone calls, from emails. But what they're not getting is those in-person touch points every single day in a systematic way that AIPAC has actually built, and that the Israel First Lobby has instituted and incorporated into their work for years. And so that's why it's so important for our organizations to have the capacity to do the work that we are doing, because I'll be honest, like, AIPAC has never been weaker. And I think part of the reason is, like Odelia said, they thrive on their power, which is the money in politics today. And I think we got the history as well about like where AIPAC has been effective and where they have been successful. But at a certain point, money does have diminishing marginal returns. And when you are fighting a messaging battle and you are fighting for policies that are just unequivocally undermining the communities that are going to get those elected officials elected, there's only so much that money can do. There's only so much that you can spend before it stops mattering. And I think we've already hit that point. And I think AIPAC realizes that. There are going to be instances where they're going to spend a lot of money, but when you're talking about the 60, 70, 80, even more candidates that are viable, that are running legitimate campaigns across the country against people who have just not been vocal on this issue, AIPAC can't spend 10 or 12 million dollars in every single one of those races. And even if they did, in some of them, it won't matter. The reality is, and I love Jamal and I love Corey, their races in 2024 were already vulnerable. For Jamal, it was in particular because of redistricting. It gave AIPAC an opportunity to send a message, and I think they capitalized on that. But their shadow extends far beyond their actual power projection. So they are trying to send a message. They are trying to scare politicians, and I think those same politicians that used to be fearful are no longer, because they are realizing that AIPAC is carrying a message that isn't resonating with voters. And I think it's our job to build the infrastructure and the political power in our communities to get people mobilized, to get them to be part of the solution. And if AIPAC is the problem in American politics, then we need to be collectively the solution. And that's why we need organizations like A New Policy that are doing this work, that are creating opportunities for millions of Americans to be part of something that they feel like they can join.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have one question to just add into this, which is, we're here talking about the lobby, AIPAC, right? But do we have to also account for the non-lobby motivations for the Western support of Israel? Because I think, like Tarek, you mentioned American values, and that's great. In theory, they're great. But it's not just like, if only there were an AIPAC, then the U.S. politicians would be doing the right thing and we'd be on the right side, right? Like, what is the relationship between AIPAC and other interest groups, whether that's the arms industry or that's kind of a more general hegemony imperialist model?
Arms industry.
I think, there's a lot of overlap between the two. I don't think in the absence of AIPAC we'll see just, decolonization efforts and liberation for every people around the world, especially from the river to the sea. They're not the only stakeholders in the game. We have the the weapons industry. It used to be maybe more conspiratorial to surface that as an underlying issue for why the world looks like it looks today. I think it's quite obvious to folks in this room, and that's broadening as well. And general American imperialism is at hand, and white supremacy is at hand. I think Jewish supremacy and white evangelical Zionist supremacy really work well together. So I think AIPAC is able to provide an avenue for different groups and different stakeholders to profit off of genocide, to profit off of apartheid. In their absence, they'll still work at it. I think AIPAC is very organized, and we actually have a lot to learn from their tactics. And we also have a lot to learn from their forthcoming downfall. And there's going to be a vacuum as well. What we're seeing now is already a vacuum. We have representatives like Seth Moulton, who was mentioned earlier. He has eyes on an electoral position in the Senate, and he knows now that if he doesn't reject AIPAC donations, he may lose a huge votership. We have Pete Buttigieg for the first time. He's probably going to run for president again. And he said that he would vote or he would support blocking weapons to Israel, which he hadn't, that's not a position he's taken before, because he knows that the voters are predominantly in that position. The majority of Americans, only 8% of Democratic voters support Israel's military actions in Gaza. So I think in their absence, we have to create enough space and also yes actions. What can they do? And hopefully we'll have discussions in the future, hopefully in this space, about when the United States stops sending arms to Israel and supporting a genocide, what can these members of Congress do proactively to ensure that there is human rights and dignity for everyone from the river to the sea and beyond?
I want to say, like, it's easy to look at the totality of the challenges and sort of get discouraged. Like, yeah, okay, if AIPAC is not this influence, then something else is. And this, but I would not underestimate just how much all of this is like a game of inches. Like, so going back to the nuclear deal, I had a conversation with a Senate staffer about encouraging him to do something for his boss to come out against this sanctions bill that AIPAC had promoted in the middle of the talks to strengthen Obama's hand that would have killed the talks. And I mean, you never know what it was, but just having those conversations, reaching the right person, making that impression with people, little things can change the direction of the totality of what we're doing. And so I just think, yes, there is massive structural change that needs to happen, but also as advocates, we can't take for granted just by showing up, by being in the right place. It's a little bit of luck, it's a little bit of art and science doing this lobbying work. And, preparation meets opportunity, and suddenly you have this breakthrough that can actually change the trajectory of major policy issues. And I think that is often the case with these things that seem like insurmountable challenges. There are actually these moments, these opportunities where if you can sway the right person, you can actually change the trajectory. So in this story, that senator then came out against it. And maybe it was my conversation, maybe it was another conversation, but like later that day came out against the bill, and that was the vote that tanked that sanctions bill. It wasn't all me, but I'm sort of centering myself in this story.
It was a lot, you.
Yeah. I was a big deal, a big part of it. But anyway, so I just want to sort of caveat, don't get discouraged by how bad everything is.
And just to clarify, I wasn't saying it's insurmountable. I just think we need to be clear-eyed about what motivates our politicians. But I also think something that will happen is if something like AIPAC loses its power, the contradictions become clearer, right? It becomes clearer why the U.S. is doing what it's doing. It can't hide under this, we want to protect Jews and save Israel, and Jews have the right to defend themselves, right? Like all of that kind of falls away. So.
And I think, it's important to recognize the historic wins that our movement has had, even amidst the horror that we're watching on the news each day. I mean, the public opinion right now in America has swung 48 points in general favor of towards Palestinians. It was plus 48 originally for Israel in general before October 2023. and now it's +1 for the Palestinians. And the majority of Senate Democrats have now supported blocking offensive weapons, and even I think just today, Rashida Tlaib had put out a resolution with 21 co-sponsors immediately demanding a definition of genocide to describe Israel's conduct in Gaza. So, and that sort of thing happening publicly with this much robust support, us being able to have this event, is not something people could really imagine. I think 2 years ago, and the progress is immense. So I'm gonna switch gears. I want to thank you. Yeah, we'll give it up for that. Let's switch gears. Jamal, I want to put you on the spot. Let's talk about Iran disinformation campaigns, and let's be specific, because AIPAC was supportive of the Iraq War. Netanyahu was as well. They have been pushing, especially in recent years and recent months, this regional war strategy of building space to attack Lebanon and Yemen. But no theater more dramatically than with Iran, and there have been recent reports talking about Israeli-linked disinformation campaigns on regime change with Iran, isolation and bombing of Iran. So talk a little bit more about that disinformation campaign on Iran specifically, and the fight to combat it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Netanyahu calls the second battlefield, the information space and the sort of public relations. And so this expose recently came out. Haaretz did a report on it. Citizen Lab had an investigation around it of just how the Netanyahu government is utilizing social media, AI-powered bots, all kinds of things. In this case, to target Iran and Iranians. So they had evidence that, so when Israel was bombing Iran in the 12-day war in June, in one example, people started tweeting out this video of Evin prison being bombed. And Evin prison is, kind of this notorious prison in Iran. It was built by the Shah, taken over by the Islamic Republic, and a big part of it is actually to jail dissidents. And Israel thought, or Netanyahu thought, or some brilliant person there, actually some of these discussions have leaked, but thought that, part of that war was aimed at trying to destabilize Iran and encourage people to, as bombs are falling on their head, to rise up and overthrow the regime. And I guess then recognize Israel, and everything's good then. But so people started tweeting out this video of Evin prison being bombed with messages like, "Okay, the bombing has ended. It's time to show up and start protesting and help the prisoners out." And it turned out the video was just AI generated, slop. And the messages being posted were these bot accounts and these artificial accounts trying to encourage people to come out and get killed, but rise up against the regime. And this, I think, is, obviously it's very scary as far as what can be done abroad and targeting populations like the Iranian people, but also Israel plays so much in this space here domestically in the United States. So my organization has been targeted by, for example, when Donald Trump was first sworn in, members of his team worked with a group called Black Cube, an Israeli, what do they call it, dark ops or something, to try to dig up dirt on Obama administration officials who were involved in the nuclear deal. And they had operatives come after us to try to get us to reveal things about Obama officials and things like that. So it's, in this case, like real spy stuff. In other cases, there was just last year, an Israeli firm got caught, again, using bots and sock puppets and things online, targeting members of Congress on their Facebook feeds or something. It wasn't a very effective operation. It uses Facebook, but targeting people on their Facebook feed. And this all got reported, and so NIAC and some other groups wrote to the Biden administration, wrote to the Justice Department, hey, they're literally targeting members of Congress. And we were particularly interested in this because we have evidence that we were targeted with similar operations, these bot farms and trolling us and trying to really actually turn the Iranian American community against itself by manipulating social media. But, and then the Justice Department obviously did nothing. U.S. lawmakers are being targeted by a foreign government with an online foreign influence operation. But, if it had been Iran doing that, I guarantee you, Wall Street Journal write-up, press conference, or Russia or China. I mean, if it's Russia, Iran, China, they'll do something. Now, when my organization was being targeted in 2022 with some of this stuff, this online stuff, when we went to law enforcement, you could tell they were like, okay, if this is Iran that's doing it, we're going to pursue it. If it's Israel, you're sort of on your own. And they even said, like, well, if it's Israel, it's sort of a diplomatic matter. It's not a law enforcement matter. So anyway, so that's just like kind of the impunity that that the Israeli government operates with. And I think, this doesn't directly connect to AIPAC, but I do think we need to understand sort of the constellation of organizations and interests who all are working, whether it's coordinated or informally coordinated, and that's part of why they're so effective at what they do.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you. And it's such a complex operation that honestly the Israeli lobby has taken on to fracture the Iranian diaspora. But NIAC, we did unprecedented polling earlier this year of the community before the war, and found that the vast majority of the community has supported a deal. And if you go online and look at the IDF Farsi account and you see what they are saying Iranians want, it's complete departure. I mean, it's complete fantasy land, and they even believe that propaganda to such an extent that nobody protested during the war, and the Iranian people's feelings for their government are well known. During the Women Life Freedom movement, protests in all 30 provinces of Iran. So Iranians don't need so much extra motivation. Anyway, so let's keep it moving. Katie, let's pass it over to you for our next question.
So I actually want to talk about the grassroots movement and the takeaways for that. The public mobilization for Gaza, ceasefire, and diplomacy, which has really reached historic levels. What lessons have you learned, and this is for you in particular, but anyone can obviously respond. What lessons have you learned in terms of translating kind of street-level protests and student organizing into measurable legislative or policy wins?
Amazing. Yeah, so for those who don't know, FCNL, which is the organization I work for, is the Friends Committee on National Legislation. It's the Quaker lobby group. I get to work with the cutest constituents in the United States, Quakers in every single state. We have thousands of constituents. They're extremely knowledgeable, extremely passionate, extremely peaceful, kind, loving people. The underlying value of my organization and the Quaker movement and faith in general is that there is that of God within everyone. I'm a practicing Jewish person who works in the organization, and I am, aligned with their values very much, and I'm encouraged in meetings to talk to people from an eye-to-eye, God-to-God level. Bring that faith, bring that the values into the space. And I feel really, really fortunate to work with this specific constituency, although we also work in coalition with over 150 national organizations, including NIAC and their incredible constituency, including a new policy, including several faith groups. Those are Christian, Muslim, Jewish faith groups, humanitarian organizations with operations on the ground, and some of them U.S. constituents, as well as doctors who've been on medical missions to Gaza and come back. They are U.S. constituents who have this information. So working with, people from districts, from states, when they are in a room with lobbyists like ourselves and say, me as a voter, I care about this issue, I've seen what I've seen, my faith compels me to, my job compels me to be here today, has been extremely powerful. I think it would be a lie if I said that the trying to translate what's happening on the ground in the U.S. with this movement and the vastness of this movement to congressional action I think it would be a lie to say that I haven't been extremely frustrated and disappointed in Congress over time. Just a quick couple words on myself. I was born and raised in Jerusalem. I'm a Jewish person with Israeli citizenship and U.S. citizenship. And before moving to the United States, I lobbied the Israeli Knesset. And I thought, okay, I need to use my U.S. citizenship where it matters most and lobby U.S. Congress, because they're the people who fundamentally are creating the changes that are implicating my life and lives of millions of people around me. And I thought it would be, the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I found that some members of Congress and some staff members are just as cowardly or vicious or brutal or racist as the folks I was talking to in the Israeli government. But I think there are more people in the United States than there who have voiced a voice of reason and humanism. I think the majority of Americans, we are reflecting what the majority of Americans want and believe in as well. I'm really inspired by the grassroots organizers and the movements that have been formed. Again, I get paid to do my job, and I love my job, and I think it's really important, but a lot of people, like I believe most of the folks here, are doing it because they care genuinely. Some are directly impacted, some have family who are directly impacted, and some do not. And I think that's really inspiring. That's also really inspiring for members of Congress when they meet you in person and hear your stories. I also think that, when constituents learn to advocate, learn to make a real ask, a legislative ask in a room, that has been really powerful. And I wanted to talk real quick about, one of AIPAC's tactics that were mentioned earlier is punishing members of Congress, right? I don't know if folks know this, on AIPAC's website, there's a list of members that you can donate to. If a member of Congress vocally criticizes Israel in a way that they do not find appealing, they'll remove their name from the list of members that they endorse that you can donate to directly. Like was mentioned earlier, they'll invest millions and millions of dollars in primaries to unseat folks. What I think that constituents have been able to do in the past 2 years, and the movement has been able to do in the past 2 years, is hold these members of Congress accountable for specific actions that really showed them how in tune the movement is to what their representatives are doing. For example, if a member of Congress is not on the Block the Bombs Act, it was introduced by Representative Delia Ramirez, now has 56 co-sponsors. Look up if your member of Congress is not on there. If they're not, there's absolutely no reason any U.S. congressperson should not be on that resolution. It is shameful. There's no reason a member of Congress should not be on a resolution calling for the immediate resumption of aid to Gaza. No reason whatsoever. There's no, harm done to any U.S. citizen by calling for that. So I think that that's something that the movement has been able to do. And one more actual, I think very strong example was also mentioned earlier in the letters that NIAC led, calling out members of Congress, specifically senators and Democratic senators who voted no on joint resolutions of disapproval to block weapons to Israel. Some who were mentioned, Senator Booker, Schumer, Gillibrand. Here's an example I think is really powerful from the movement, and then I'll pass it forward. Senator Cantwell, Washington State. She has consistently voted no on blocking weapons to Israel. So she is basically sending more weapons to Israel. But Washington State, as I think folks know, doesn't support that in the majority of the population there. In response, different councils and districts passed resolutions condemning Senator Cantwell. She had also met with Netanyahu and taken a picture with him earlier that year. Super, super shameful and unrepresentative. So they passed 7 resolutions over time in the state, and NIAC led a letter that FCNL and a new policy also supported, condemning the senator for voting no to block weapons to Israel. And since then, she has come out in a statement. There hasn't been another vote, but she has said that she would support blocking weapons to Israel. She knows her constituents have identified where she has misbehaved to this extent. She knows that she is risking their votes. She knows that she's being watched on specific pieces of legislation. And I think that's been really powerful to see when students on campuses, when Quakers in their meetings across the United States are able to identify the legislation that their member of Congress needs to be on and able to, punish or condemn those who are not. That has actually created waves. And I think we've seen in July, the majority of Democrats in the Senate voted to block weapons to Israel. So Chuck Schumer, Gillibrand, Cantwell, and Booker, they're in the minority of their party right now. And they should be ashamed of themselves, and we should let them know.
Thank you, Adelia. Let's keep the momentum from that going. Tarek, I want to ask another question. Can you expand on that a little bit by just talking about, our plan, our coalition's approach and clear plan, right now as an alternative? What is AIPAC? We've talked a lot about what AIPAC wants and is doing, but what are sort of our coalitions? What's our main plan right now, and how do advocates and donors and organizers keep building this infrastructure to rival and eventually defeat AIPAC? And what is a new policy doing specifically on that?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. I'm going to try and tie this all together because there's such an important role for the grassroots to play here. As we know, what we've seen AIPAC do, they always tout, 5 million. Now they're talking about 6 million members. The reality is that we really need to actually bring people from the communities, educate them, help them have an on-ramp to the political system in a way that we can plug in where people are to their politicians. And it's something that, AIPAC has had many years of an advantage on the rest of us. But again, they're in a weaker posture. So as a coalition of people who are fighting for human rights, who are fighting for a better U.S. policy here, we need to identify every single moment and opportunity, like Adelia said, when we know that there are members of Congress who have not signed on to legislation to block weapons or sign on to resolutions to resume humanitarian aid, restore funding to UNRWA, stopping the annexation, whether it is an official annexation or a de facto annexation. The reality is that in the West Bank, that continues to happen every single day. There are American citizens that are being held in Israeli prisons with no real charges, children, people who are literally there because our American politicians are not willing to use any political leverage to bring them home. And so when we recognize how many different opportunities there are to get these members on the record, to demand that they can be better on this issue, we have to continue to press them. It's also important to recognize that you're not going to get someone who's never said anything or done anything, never signed a letter, to just immediately support blocking weapons. And I think that is an okay thing to recognize. We need to see progress, so we need to make sure that, okay, they haven't signed on to block the bombs, but they haven't signed on to a bill to call for the restoration of funding to UNRWA. They should be doing that, and then they should be blocking bombs, and then they should be calling it genocide. So there needs to be this step ladder, and we need to make sure that our communities understand, as constituents for these members, exactly what their members have done and tying it all together. And a new policy is doing that every single day. We are working with our partners, but we are also in communities and talking to them about their members. I'm unfortunately not with you guys in person today because I'm in LA sitting down with communities here in Los Angeles, building coalitions with the local groups, because it is so important for us to understand that there is an ecosystem at the local level that is already activated and already talking with their local electeds. They're talking to their city councils, their county commissioners, their school boards about all of the different things that are happening in their communities, that they can be more activated and they can hold them accountable. And then they want to also bring that same energy to the federal level. A new policy is working at the federal level to really make sure that we are providing that information to millions of Americans, to those community organizers, to those local groups, so that we can build that ecosystem and that political power that is really needed. And then we're tying it to the political side too, because a new policy PAC is interviewing candidates. They're making sure that we are getting questionnaires filled out, and we're building the same campaign finance infrastructure. We actually have built it now to provide that direct financing to candidates in the same way that AIPAC does to attribute every single dollar to an unconditional support to Israel that AIPAC does. We're doing the opposite, where we are saying every single dollar that comes through a new policy PAC to these candidates is about a better policy, a new policy that aligns American values with those policies when it comes to U.S. foreign policy towards Palestine and Israel. And we are making sure that we are going to be as loud as possible, bringing together all of these coalitions and bringing people together to make sure that we can overcome the millions of quote unquote members that AIPAC has, because there are tens of millions of Americans who completely disagree with AIPAC's position. We already have the people that are activated. It's about bringing them into the tent, making them part of the system, and making sure that they understand that actually we are winning. We are seeing changes in American politics so extreme and so fast. This is something that is not common. This is not the norm to see this level of progress on any single issue, regardless of whether it's healthcare, wages, whether it's whether it's anything related to consumer finance, whether it's education, whether it's immigration. It took so many years to see any micro level progress on those issues. The fact that we're seeing such huge shifts, particularly in democratic politics, on the U.S. relationship with Israel is a sign that we are winning. We have to bring everyone into the fold, into the infrastructure that a new policy and that other organizations are building. And that means creating real lasting membership where people can be part of this. So here at a new policy, like if you want to join the work that we are doing, if you want to build the antidote to AIPAC and actually be part of the solution, you can actually join us today at act.anewpolicy.org/membership and join, become a member, get on our newsletter. We have hundreds of volunteers across the country already. We're getting new volunteers every single day. We want to activate people. We want you to get plugged in with campaigns as well. We're doing all of that work and we want you guys to be part of it. So I know NIAC is also doing the same. I know SCNL is doing the same. You should join these organizations as well. Just because you're part of one organization doesn't mean you are only part of one organization. We want you to be part of all of our organizations to be able to build this power and to be able to show American politicians that there is a different goal that we are trying to achieve, one that actually prioritizes our communities and our collective interests first.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you. Well, folks, I think now we should leave some time for questions from the audience for our panelists. We have about